Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Tottenham Hotspur, eh? It's never ever a quiet day. It really isn't. Even yesterday, I went to try and write a pretty positive piece on Cristian Romero, and then everything with Harry Kane happened. And I must admit, I don't know about you guys, but I was surprised. I'm not often surprised by a lot of things in football, but for Harry Kane not to turn up on the day when he was expected to turn up to at Tottenham, I was surprised. I'll be honest. I'm completely honest. I don't know. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into it rather than me just kind of sounding off about that. So what are the facts? The facts are, as far as Tottenham Hotspur were aware, they were expecting Harry Kane to return Monday morning at Hotspur Way, Monday morning just gone, to do not only his COVID test, but also some blood work, the kind of blood work test that they do before they're able to start pre-season training. Unfortunately, Harry Kane did not appear. So again, today, there was obviously a will he be in today? And he was not in today. So, as of this morning, I was told that Tottenham were not aware when he was set to return. It should be pointed out that I also understand that Harry Kane, certainly as of Friday, was in the Bahamas. I'm led to believe that wasn't the last day of his holidays. So now you also have the other issue that comes with when Harry Kane does return to Hotspur Way, there will clearly have to be an element of isolation as well, or whether before he even comes back to Hotspur Way. I think the way that Spurs have been going about it this summer, we've seen it with new signings, and we'll see it pretty much, I'd imagine, with anyone coming back into the country, especially because most of them are at the age where they probably haven't had their second jabs yet, possibly even their first jabs. Obviously, it's their choice and what they have, but yeah, I mean, what they seem to be doing is that they go into the lodge and they stay there for 5 days, and then they can use a private pitch alongside the lodge, which they're taken to, or they go to separately. So essentially, it's the equivalent of our gardens in our house if we were isolating. There's that element as well. So, we had this morning, like I say, that there was no current understanding of when Kane was returning. Then I'd say within 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, we heard the noise like beep, 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 and there seemed to be a bit of a U-turn going. I think mainly sounding like it's come from Kane's camp, that he would be back in training later this week, possibly the weekend. It's loosely changed, depending on who you're hearing it from. What I would say, obviously, is that we don't entirely know yet that return to training, whether that takes the form of going into isolation at the lodge at Hotspur Way to do individual training, or whether that means a return to full training, which clearly would be a little bit later. It's a mess. It's Tottenham Hotspur, so it always seems to be a mess. But yeah, I think it's clear to see whatever is whichever way it's now turned or painted or twisted or whatever, Tottenham expected him to be back on Monday morning. That was what they told Harry Kane. That was the date they expected him back. And what I would say is that Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and Giovanni Lo Celso were also expected back on Monday, but came back a few days earlier just to crack on and get into it, I think. And that's not to say anyone's better than another person or anything. It's just purely to state that those two players also had a set date to return, and they came back a little bit earlier. So, some people might say, hey, he balances it out. But yeah, it's such a mess. And what I'd say, this is my opinion, this is just purely on a personal level, I don't understand what making this sort of stand does. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I think I've seen scenarios in the past in transfer sagas where maybe, let's say, a very good bid has come in, but the selling club are just saying, no, we don't want to sell. And then I think in those situations, I don't really agree with it on any occasion, but you can maybe understand the logic of a player kicking up a fuss and saying, well, I'm not playing, I'm not training, whatever. And I'm not saying that's exactly what Kane's done, but in those situations we've seen that, and it's kind of helped force the move. But where I feel it's very different with this scenario right now is that Manchester City have not made a bid or an indication of making any bid anywhere near what would be the right value for Harry Kane. So for Harry Kane to not return to training when expected and have this little bit of a standoff, it almost feels like he's doing it to the wrong people. It's like, yes, Spurs are making it very clear their intention is not to sell him. And was also told in the past that, if he ever was to go, they would more likely look to send him to a foreign club, which is Kane doesn't want to move abroad. As I said, always a mess. But I don't understand the logic of trying to go on some kind of standoff now to force a club. I mean, what's the logic? What is the point? Is it to tell Tottenham you need to accept a really low bid for me? I don't get it. And I think it's made even more complicated for Harry Kane and his people by the Jack Grealish transfer. Because, maybe you could have looked at the transfer market and said, oh, you're asking too much for Harry. And that's not even to say they're asking for something. But obviously, we know it's going to be above 150 million more, maybe even reaching 200 that Tottenham would look at for, such a player. But I think that's become even more muddied for Kane and his people by the fact of the Jack Grealish transfer, because Jack Grealish looks like it's going to be a £100 million transfer. And Jack Grealish is a superb player. I really like Jack Grealish. You've heard me talk about it, how it's one of my biggest aggravations that Tottenham didn't just push that deal through earlier when they had the chance to sign him from Aston Villa. I'll never understand it. Well, I do understand why they did it, but I don't understand the logic of doing it. But yeah, so, terrific player. However, if Jack Grealish is 100 million, what the hell is Harry Kane? This is the England captain, the top goal scorer in the Premier League, the Golden Boot holder, the Playmaker Award for most assists in the Premier League, second highest goal scorer in Spurs history, very good chance of going on and being the Premier League's top goal scorer ever. He scored in the Champions League, Premier League, derbies. The man scores goals. He's a brilliant player. So, as I've said, if we're saying Grealish is 100 million, then Harry Kane is right up there. I don't even think Jack Grealish would disagree with that. So I think that's utterly stuffed Kane's camp, really, because it makes it even more of a scenario of, well, what are you complaining about? If Manchester City really want Harry Kane, they will have to put in a huge bid for him. Everyone I know that works around Manchester City, deals with Manchester City, are telling me Manchester City have no inclination to make a huge cash bid for Harry Kane of the kind of value that would even start Tottenham to turn their head and think, okay, well, what more have you got to say? So I don't get I don't want to say it's having a strop or anything, because it's quite patronising. It's not. It's just it's a man who clearly wants a fresh challenge and he wants to try and make that happen. But it's almost like you should be telling Manchester City that. You should be saying, why are you not going to make a huge bid for me? Do you not want me that much? Whereas I think turning his attention, I've heard, there's been lots of talk of this gentleman's agreement. How many times have we heard gentleman's agreement when it comes to footballers and transfers and everything? I'm going to have to use the old rubbish joke of gentleman's agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on, because it's not written on paper. It's not. And it's like, I don't think any agent certainly in the modern era, works on gentleman's agreements or verbal agreements. You work on contracts, and obviously you work on values, and that's what you work on. You work on deals, negotiations, and maybe looking to make things easier with other clients you've got, things like that. But in very much black and white and written on paper, Harry Kane agreed to a 6-year deal in 2018. That's that. And it's like, I don't get, I've never been a big fan of the whole, oh, but you said kind of thing, because we know what this is like, and especially in business, it's not like that, let alone football. Do I have sympathy for Harry Kane? To a degree, I have a sympathy for a man who is one of the world's best strikers and will go down as one of Tottenham's greatest ever strikers, I think, even if he kind of sullies his reputation with his fans slightly this week. And I understand, I do believe that Tottenham didn't show the same ambition as the level that he was at. I completely understand that. I would also maybe say I've got one foot slightly in the camp of, but he's had chances to win big games with Tottenham, and he maybe in those big games hasn't performed. I would add the caveat that I think in a lot of those big games he's been coming into it with an injury, or his teammates certainly haven't helped him out either, haven't been on the best form. But I would still say you look to those big players, you look to those world-class £200 million players to be the ones that grab the game by the scruff of the neck and they win it for you, or they make a massive impact. And I'd say certainly Kane has done that in some games. I'm not saying that's a blanket statement at all. He's had big matches against Chelsea, Arsenal, games like that. But what I would say, and Man United, teams like that, but I would say just we've seen in finals and we've seen in some semi-finals, just maybe hasn't absolutely hit the mark when the team really needed him to. So while I think he's a fantastic player, and he's probably one of the players that I've most enjoyed watching kind of develop and do what he does in my entire kind of life watching Spurs, yeah, I do think there's that little element to you've had your chances. But I 100% agree that the club have not been as ambitious as his level is, definitely. And I'd maybe say, and I think I've said this before, but I'd actually say that in terms of big game players, I'd maybe go as far to say Sonny's actually more of a big game player than Harry Kane. Might be a controversial opinion, I don't know. But I just kind of feel that in the biggest games, I've really seen Sonny rise to it. We've seen the Champions League quarterfinal against Man City, both legs of that as well, and just various other games where I feel, I wouldn't say he steps up every time. As I say, I think that the team as a whole often maybe have that psychological thing in big games as well. But I just think maybe Son slightly more than Kane. And again, you're comparing two amazing players. I'm really not saying one is incredibly better than the other or anything. I think they both could be right up there. I think Son is going to have a very, very big season. I've got a feeling about it. But anyway, yes. So it'd be interesting to see how the fans take it now. Like I say, there's this beep, beep, beep. There's been this U-turn today where I think probably the reaction has been seen. I think maybe there would be a feeling that most of the fans would have previously thought, you know what, how can you begrudge Harry Kane a move after everything he's done for Tottenham? And I think there was a large section of fans that probably thought that. It'd be a massive wrench, in their kind of their heart, and to see Harry Kane go, one of their own, player they've sung about for years on the terraces, and he's given so much, he absolutely has. But I think when you take it to the I'm not going to turn up when you expect me to turn up side of things, it becomes, I think, for fans a bit of a disrespectful thing. It becomes a bit more of a personal kind of thing on his character. On the club, and it's we've seen this before where some fans have never forgiven Gareth Bale for going, and he he had a little bit of a strop, I think, towards the end at Spurs. Berbatov gets the same, Modric gets the same, and I think if Harry Kane were to continue to go down this route, then I think that would be a big thing. It would be such a shame. It would be such a shame, and I think that's why we're now seeing this. Oh, he'll be back. He'll be back. Don't worry. But obviously, there's a long time of this window to go, and there's a lot more twists and turns and everything. Another thing I would say is I almost do feel like the people that went further into tournaments have been slightly penalised in a weird way, because the likes of, let's say, Roden, Davies, Lloris, players like that, they got around 4 weeks off from when they finished the Euros, whereas the players that got even further to the semi-finals and the finals, I've only got kind of just over 21 days, which is the minimum Spurs have kind of said they want them to at least have 3 weeks rest. But I would say that because of the season coming so quickly, those players that did well have had to come back that little bit sooner. And yeah, you could argue that's not particularly fair, perhaps, but also I suppose if they want to be involved with a new manager, new season, massive game to start the campaign, they kind of have to be in with a good week or more, well, preferably 2 weeks to kind of work and get that little bit of sharpness and understanding his philosophy just to go into that first game in some kind of shape. But yeah, let's see where this plays out. I still stick by the view that I just can't see Man City offering the sort of money that would make any deal happen. There's obviously been talk of swaps with various players coming the other way. My problem with that is, and this is with no disrespect meant to Tottenham, it's more the scale of where Man City are at and the wages and everything. But if you're a Man City player, why would you come to Tottenham Hotspur right now? Do you see what I mean? And that's meant in no disrespect whatsoever. It's more, if you're at a team where you're guaranteed silverware, guaranteed a huge wage, why would you drop down to Tottenham? You know, it would have to be really well sold, and I struggle to see how that element of a swap deal works. Certainly, some of the names I've seen mentioned, I'm just kind of like, really, I don't get that. Which kind of then lends itself to a straight cash deal, which, by all the sounds of it, Man City aren't going to go that high. You know, if they do, then obviously there'll be something to talk about, but. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, and especially, like I say, with Kane having been in the Bahamas up to, like I say, at least on Friday. I'm led to believe longer than that. And this is what happened last year. Last year was a bit unfortunate. He went off to the Bahamas again then, or he went off to the Bahamas previously, and he, unfortunately, while he was out there, the rules changed, and you had to isolate on your return. There were some at Tottenham, some people who were a little bit irked by the fact that he'd gone there in the first place with the uncertainty over certain countries and what could suddenly change. But there's more an unfortunate side. So he missed his return really to pre-season training then. Although, was he advised against a holiday? I don't know. The Spurs might argue that. I don't know. So I'm not going to say that was the case. But certainly this is now another summer where it hasn't quite gone as it should have done. So yeah, and obviously you've got the element of a Harry Kane not being particularly delighted to stick around, and what does that bring you? I mean, from what I'm led to believe, I don't think he was absolutely ecstatic at being around last season either. If this talk of a gentleman's agreement is true, then that would have come about because he'd already said he wanted to go. You don't have a gentleman's agreement because you're happy to stay. You see what I mean? You have to have had that because he would have hoped to have gone last summer. So I don't think we probably saw the happiest Harry Kane in the world last season, but he produced what he did. He had an incredible season, certainly individually. So yeah, I don't know, it's just such a mess. It's just like, I feel like these videos, one of those where the expression is, if you don't laugh, you'd cry, because it's just so mad to write about. I was talking with another journalist this morning and saying, like, are we going to be writing an article every morning of Harry Kane's not at training today? It's like, it's so boring as well. It's like, I say boring. It's boring for us. I know you guys want to know that, and certainly we'll do our best to inform you of that. But it's boring to write the same article over and over again, and it just should never have got to this position. I don't understand why it's happened. If you were told clearly this is the date you have to come back, you just have to come back for that day, because otherwise it's just a bad look. And as I've said, I don't get the logic of it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then obviously if you do a protracted thing, you get into the whole area of breach of contract, which is like, that's not good. You don't really want to go around that route at all. That's really not where you want to go. But yeah, so we'll see with Harry Kane. It's I think there's a little bit more to come from this. And like I say, I'd keep an eye on the whole isolation aspect of it, because I do believe it's going to prevent Harry Kane from returning to full training for a little while. Which is going to have a knock-on effect. Obviously, the Man City game as well. He's not going to be involved against Chelsea tomorrow night in a friendly. I can't see him being involved against Arsenal at the weekend. I'd be stunned if he was. purely, like I say, because of various things. And then even Man City, it's like, do you put him in for a game against a team that he wants to clearly join? It's like, I think you'd be mad to myself. And it's just such a shame we're talking about this sort of stuff about a guy, Harry Kane, who in previous years is such an incredible professional. He's had such a high standards of everything he's done. And the fact that we're talking about now not potentially playing him in a match because we're worried about how he'd perform because it's a club he wants to join, it's such a shame. It's such a shame. Should it have been allowed to get to this point? That's another question altogether. But I just know Harry Kane is one of my favourite players. He really is. He's such a brilliant player. I love watching him. And it'd just be such a shame if he tarnishes everything he's done. And my hope is that he doesn't. My hope is that there's some kind of conclusion to this that doesn't bring that about. But you can just feel the Spurs fans starting to turn. It's such a shame. That's happened to so many Spurs players. And maybe that's part of a bigger problem. There's so many Spurs players that have been absolutely class and real, almost generational talent types, or certainly for Spurs, generational players. And it just feels like almost every time it's ended in this slightly sour way, and I just really hope it doesn't with Harry Kane. But enough of Harry Kane. There'll be more to come. By the time this video even goes out there may be more to have come out from various sides of this whole mess. Let's talk about a bit more positive. Well, hopefully, Cristian Romero. I was at the open training on Saturday, and if I thought I got it on Twitter from Romero News, my goodness, in person, you boys and girls were coming up and asking that a lot. But to be fair, it was lovely. It was lovely to meet so many people. It was brilliant. But yeah, pretty much everyone, even people passing. I had one person shouted during the training session from about 5 blocks away, just bellowed, "Romero News, Ali!" And it was like, it just made me crack up. Absolutely crack up. So the latest on Cristian Romero, again, because this is quite fast moving, apologies if this has come out before this video is uploaded, because once I've done it, it takes about an hour for it to get online because of my internet from the 1970s. And yes, I'm aware that we didn't have the internet in the 70s. So the latest is that Tottenham had a very positive day yesterday in terms of getting towards some kind of conclusion with Atalanta for Cristian Romero. There's a real kind of belief that it looks like it's going to happen. There was a rough kind of agreement in principle. I'm told that they'll get their kind of final official answer this afternoon about their bid, which is, I believe, is around 50 million euros, which I think I worked that out is about 43 million pounds roughly, and I think there's some add-ons as well. They're going to get their official answer on that. A lot of it was to do with Atalanta getting in their replacement. They've brought in Lovato from Hellas Verona. He's more of a younger player. They wanted someone a little bit kind of more experienced, and it looks like potentially that's going to be Demiral from Juventus. And if you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, there's one man in the middle of all of this. Yes, it's Fabio Paratici. Fabio Paratici is like that man, the expression fingering lots of pies. Paratici is like, he's always like, when you get a movie and you get that character in the shadows in the background going, whoa. It's like Thanos in the Avengers before we knew that Thanos was the big bad villain. That's not to say Paratici's a villain. It's just to say that he just seems to have a little kind of influence on everything. So if you look at it, it's like Atalanta signed Romero on a 2-year loan with an option to buy him permanently from Juventus. The deal was agreed with Fabio Paratici. Now Tottenham are doing a deal with Atalanta to bring Romero from Atalanta once Atalanta have exercised that option put in by Paratici. Who's the man who's doing the deals for Tottenham? Fabio Paratici. Atalanta are looking at Mihir Demiral from Juventus. Who signed Demiral for Juventus and knows his worth and his value and maybe can slightly help a deal? Fabio Paratici. Seriously, this guy is like, I've talked about the spider web before. He's like a like a puppet master almost as well. So Spurs are certainly a lot more positive yesterday about where this deal was going, and there's a real hope that they're going to get the answer they want. Romero wants to come. He's agreed personal terms already. So there's fingers crossed. Hopefully, when this video comes out, you'll be able to say, "Oh, Alistair, it's already been done, you muppet." And I'm not saying you all talk like that. I just like to do that voice. But yeah, hopefully it'll have already been done, and the deal suddenly doesn't die a death because they, do another U-turn, which we've had a lot of those in recent days and months. But I think Romero would be such a good signing. He really, really would. I've said this before, so I'm not going to go into too much about Romero, but I do think he'd be an absolute game changer. I really do. I think he's Serie A Defender of the Year last season, which I'll always say is no mean feat in a league renowned for its defending. But yeah, huge signing. That's the irony. Excuse me, if all the Kane stuff wasn't going on right now, this would be pretty huge. This would be I think all Spurs fans would be absolutely probably going mad. This is Spurs showing a bit of ambition. This is Spurs going after someone who is one of the best out there in Europe last season, seeing a problem in their own team and going, "We'll have him." And it's almost like the Kane stuff is kind of like this big person standing in the way and going, "No, you're not going to have your nice thing. I'm going to stand in the way of it and tell you about the bad thing over there," which is such a shame because, honestly, it'd be a superb sign. I really don't want to underrate it at all. I think it'd be excellent. And like I said, I still believe, I think if you were to see Davinson Sanchez head out the door, and there's still a lot of interest in him, specifically from Sevilla, they could also add to that with another central defender. But fingers crossed. Fingers crossed that even by the time this comes out, we'll have had them formally accept the offer, and then I think once you see that happen, things will move very quickly because, like I say, personal terms have already been agreed, and then it's just a case it would be of getting Romero over to England, starting the isolation process, doing his medical once he's over. He may even be able to do part of it in Italy. And just cracking on and maybe getting him here in time for the Man City game. I think that would be a push. Personally, I don't know whether you throw him into that. It depends how quickly this gets done. But if, he returned to pre-season with Atalanta, I think he was back Saturday. So you could argue, he could be at a decent level of fitness if he continues to train while all this is happening. But obviously, Espirito Santo fitness, we're told, is pretty high. I'm not entirely sure the Gasperini one is. As in, I've got a feeling it is. I think he plays a pressing game. So it could be, not that the centre-backs press, but I suppose maybe for a centre-back, perhaps you don't need that incredible level of fitness. I'm starting to talk myself out of this, and maybe you would try to get him in for the City game. Tough one. You just don't want to risk an injury. And Spurs have had their injury issues with the Argentinians over the past, and we know that. Fingers crossed we get some kind of resolution to that quite quickly. But I'd keep an eye on this afternoon, I'd say. You may be watching this tomorrow and going, what? Other players. Dusan Vlahovic, Fiorentina striker. Told Spurs very interested in him, and if they can get a bit more money together from sales and stuff, would like to bring him in to partner Harry Kane, which obviously would require a change in formation, would require two up front. We've been seeing the 4-3-3 very much from Nuno Espirito Santo in pre-season, but that would require a two up front. He's done that in the past. He did it at Porto, did it a few times at Wolves as well, and I think at other places. I think at Porto it was like a 4-4-2 diamond he played. I do wonder where Sonny would fit exactly if you were to play Vlahovic and Kane up front together. Obviously, a lot of people will now say, but he'll clearly be Kane's replacement. But that wasn't the plan. The plan is to have them both up front. But with Sonny, it'd be interesting because Sonny, I felt last season, really developed into the forward man, the guy that Kane could drop back and Sonny went into the strike position. In pre-season, he's been playing that role. I do wonder whether going back to now just being a winger on the left or right, whether that actually limits Sonny slightly. It'd be very interesting to see. It's a lovely problem to almost have too many options and how to fit them in. But and obviously that's what the top teams have. But I'd be fascinated to see if they can get Vlahovic, who looks like could be anywhere between 40 up to 50 million pounds, which is big, and that's very much a departure for Tottenham and strikers away from a cheaper young striker like Janssen, a cheaper older striker like Llorente, or a lone striker like Carlos Vinicius. This would be very much a statement. This is the thing to me as well, that ironically Kane, wants to go, but at this point, if they were to get Vlahovic as well, You've got Galini, Roy, Romero and Vlahovic. If you were to get, certainly you look at Romero and Vlahovic and you think that's two big players that come straight into it, that is quite ambitious. That really is. Vlahovic was, I think he was second or third top goal scorer in Serie A last season. He's only 21. That is a player with a hell of a lot of talent. And, with Romero, like I say, is a game changer in defence. I really feel, and a lot of people that cover Italian football have said, he could be, I'm not talking about the level of quality right now, but certainly in terms of going forward, could have the effect of a Van Dijk did on Liverpool. You could maybe even say, although he's probably not as universally loved or lauded, but like a Harry Maguire has done for the United defence and stuff like that, they're saying that he could be that kind of person. He's only 23 as well. Brian Hill, notice the pronunciation there, although technically in his video announcing himself, he called himself Ryan Hill. It was like, oh man, you're killing me. But yeah, obviously one of the most talented young Spanish prospects as well. And Galini, got a good look at him in the open training. He looks a character. He looks very quick on his feet, real shot stopper. So it'd be interesting to see whether he can kind of make himself the successor to Lloris. But certainly those are ambitious buys, and I think certainly I've been speaking to some people involved in Takahiro Tomiyasu potential deal, and they're confident that when the Olympics are done, that Tottenham will sign him. Obviously, that remains to be seen. There's probably a lot more to go, and it all would depend on finances as well. But certainly, he as a right back who can also play at centre back that'd be a very good signing as well. He's got a lot of people kind of singing his praises right now, Tomiyasu. I think he could be a good, it could be a very good transfer window. But then, hey, I said that last year, and then the one missing link probably was that starting star centre back. Obviously, I still believe Joe Rodon will become a very, very good centre back. But yeah, so what do I go? Vlahovic, Spurs like Danny Ings, of course, as well. I think that's probably more difficult to do than the Vlahovic deal, which sounds weird, but I think it is, because I do wonder, and I think I've said this before, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I do wonder if City don't get Kane, whether they bring in Danny Ings as a British player on more of a short-term basis, because this is the other thing for Kane. This is where I maybe understand the kind of the need to try to get out there this summer, because I do believe next summer you're going to have Haaland from Dortmund. I think his clause comes into effect. Isn't he available for 75 million, something like that? I think there's supposed to be something to do with Mbappe can go as well for a lesser fee. So yeah, I can kind of see whereas maybe this is the summer, but then I can also imagine a lot of those clubs are probably thinking, well, should we just wait till next summer? Because I said this before, as amazing as I think Harry Kane is, I think if you're financially looking at it from the outside, do you look at a 28-year-old who has had his injury problems? He does have his ankle problems. I wouldn't say they've absolutely harmed him like last season. It didn't really have too much effect on his goal tally or assist tally. But I suppose if you're looking at it from a brutal, cold light of day financial point of view, if you look at someone like Haaland, who is he 2021? Look at Mbappe, obviously he's around the same age. And then you look at Kane, who's 28, he's just turned 28, and you kind of wonder, is that sort of money better spent on a younger player who you get a longer term thing? I'd probably maintain, and I think Kane's people would probably say, you're probably going to get a good 4 or 5 years out of him at the top level still. But I can understand how some clubs might look at that in a certainly different way. Elsewhere in transfers, Joe Hart looks like he's heading out the door. Looks like Celtic's going to be his destination. I've been intrigued to see what happens with Celtic. There's been some talk of Celtic also being interested in Cameron Carter-Vickers, whether that becomes a thing or not as well. But certainly looks like Joe Hart's heading there. I think I said this in the last video. Joe Hart was told by Nuno Espirito Santo, look, you're just kind of not going to be part of my plans. I think for a year, I think he did a decent job at Spurs. Didn't really get the kind of, there's few people hating on him. I wouldn't probably be in that camp. I thought he did okay. And I think he'd probably been an invaluable presence behind the scenes as a winner, someone that's been there. Seems like quite a motivational chap as well. So, yeah, I think he did kind of what he was meant to do last season. There's a free transfer, and obviously Galini's now come in with the prospect of being the successor to Lloris. And obviously Hart, what is he, 34, 35? He's not going to be that successor, clearly. So, yeah, I think it'd be a good move for him, Celtic. I think it really would. Who else we got? Sergio Aurier, Moussa Sissoko, obviously Spurs still trying to get them both out the door. It's a difficult one with Moussa Sissoko. I was told, when was I told this? At the weekend, that there hadn't been any real firm interest in him. That may have changed at this point. That was the last I'd kind of heard on Sissoko. But obviously that makes it difficult. We'd all we all have maybe these certain players that we say, let's move him on. We need to get him out this window. But if there's not actually an offer for them, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Serge Aurier, like I've said before, certainly the player is very confident he'll be leaving Tottenham this window. As of yet, they were still waiting for a firm bid for him. But certainly I think his agent is working on something. There's been talk of a Japhet Tanganga loan move, which I must admit there's a side of me that would be sad about because I think he could push on this season. But there's another part of me that thinks I think an Oliver Skip-style loan for him would be a very good thing. I do, playing week in, week out, every minute. I know Galatasaray are very seriously interested in him, but Tottenham would prefer, if possible, a UK loan move for him to better prepare him, to continue that development in preferably the Premier League. And I think, he had interest. I think it was from Southampton last January. So just aware this video, by the way, is quite light. I think it's because I've got every single window open right now. So apologies if it looks like there's some shining light on me. It's just the weird lighting today. But yeah, Tanganga, I like him a lot. And interviewed him obviously only a couple of weeks ago. He's a lovely young man. But he is. No, I want to see him do well because I think he's very talented as well. I just think there's probably the issue for him right now is he's not the first choice in any of the positions he'd want to play in. And I think if that's the case, then maybe a loan move is best for him. What else? We had the open training very briefly. That was good fun. It was, I kept a close eye on it. 5,000 fans there. I feel like most of you asked about Cristian Romero, but that's fine. It was good fun. Got to see a lot of Galini. There was one little moment where he was doing stuff with the Rui Barbosa, the goalkeeping coach, and Hart and Whiteman. And they were firing shots at him. He was saving every single one. He's got terrific reflexes. And there was one, he palmed the ball across and it hit a steward. He went over and apologised. He's a real character. I think we're going to see that. I wouldn't be shocked if Spurs social media uses him a lot over the coming months. So you got to see a bit of him. They had a little moment. If you haven't seen it already, I'll put the video up on my Twitter account of Eric Dyer just moments after doing an incredible sliding goal line clearance to stop Sergio Reguilon. They were doing these little 7-a-side games. Not too long after, Tongi Ndombele was going down the wing, doing all of his step overs like he does, and he absolutely did die. I went past him. Eric Dyer just shoved out a leg and brought him down. He fell to the floor, sat there, doing what players sometimes do, and sat there having a bit of a strop. Excuse me. And Lucas Moura got the ball, maybe Carter Vickers, I can't remember who. He dispossessed the ball off someone, went up and scored, and that was actually the final winning goal. Ndombele was having a proper, come on the floor to imaginary ref, because there was no ref. It was just a training match. And then he went over to the sidelines, threw a little plastic cup, or it wouldn't have been a plastic cup, because it would have been some kind of environmentally friendly cup. He lobbed it, sat on the floor going, doing a proper strop. One of the coaches came and put their hand on his shoulder, and Dyer came over, and it was all fine. It wasn't something that became anything, but it was just like, even a little strop in a training game, it's quite funny. It's probably not I don't know, there's a side to it. Some people like that attitude. It says that they want to win and they're annoyed if they don't win. There's other people that say, like, get up and get on with it, and I get that as well. But no, that was interesting to see them. There were a fair few players missing. Ryan Sessegnon, obviously, he wasn't there. He's got a hamstring injury at the moment. He's a bit touch and go for the Man City game. He picked it up only within about a week back into pre-season. Very unfortunate he is. It's not the serious hamstring. It's not the same hamstring he had. I actually touched my hamstring there. He which you couldn't see because it's off camera. It just looked like I was weirdly putting my hand between my legs. He had a bad hamstring injury from the European Under-21 Championships the year he joined, 2019, which caused a bit of a mess for him when he joined. He didn't even play for Spurs, I don't think, till was it maybe early November, potentially. I know he only played, I think, maybe one game under Poch, and then Poch went. But yeah, it's not that hamstring. I'm told it's just a minor thing, and he's a bit touch and go for Man City, but potentially he's back in doing pitch work on it. So fingers crossed, he might be available. But other people like Lloris wasn't there, Davies wasn't at the open training, Roden. I certainly know Roden was doing double session back at Hotspur Way, and I'd imagine there's other players were doing that as well. Just to get them ready, get them up to the Espirito Santo fitness levels before. He's been doing that. There's been matches where, we saw it against MK Dons, Winks and Dyer weren't involved, and that's because they were, continuing their training. So he's managing the workloads quite carefully with them all. So that was that. Europa Conference League, we've had the draw for that. Pacos de Ferreira from Portugal, which is in the Porto region, or Lana, I don't know because I haven't been. I'm so sorry. We'll say Larne from Northern Ireland. They'll be playing each other this week, and we'll see who Tottenham get out of those two. Which, it's European football. Is it the sexiest? I said this yesterday. I've done a new podcast for anyone that'd like to listen to it with Guesty, Rob Guest, called Golden Guest Talk Tottenham. And I said to him, I was saying, if we have the, you have the Champions League anthem, la, 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 you get all of that. What do they do for the Europa Conference League? It just kind of makes you think some bloke stumbles out the pub and goes, rah, rah, rah. It's just so... And I know Tottenham weren't in Europe for 20 years before Martin Joel got them back into Europa. Other than, I think, a very brief appearance in the Intertoto Cup, wasn't it? But yeah, they hadn't been in it for years. And so we probably can't mock being in European competition right now. But it's a third tier competition. And clearly it's not going to be the apple of anyone's eye. But yeah, should Spurs scoff at European competition and the chance of a trophy? Probably not. But yeah, we'll see who they get. And then obviously, we have the Mind Series matches. We've got Chelsea tomorrow night at Stamford Bridge and Arsenal at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday. I should be at both of those games, hopefully. I think my accreditations come through for Chelsea tomorrow night. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. It's one of those where we can't judge the result too seriously. Of course we can't. Friendlies aren't about that. Friendlies are about patterns of play, shape, fitness, all of that. They kind of mean nothing. But being Chelsea and Arsenal, of course, there's going to be that little psychological edge to it. Of course there is, with the fans, and I'd say with some of the players as well, especially when you're going into a match like Man City. I don't think they're the worst games to have. Having that higher level of quality opposition just before you go into a game against, the champions of England. So, yeah, no, I'd be very intrigued to see how it all goes and who plays and who doesn't and what formation and setup, whether it's the 4-3-3 again, and just how fit the players are at and what stage they're at. And, you can judge maybe their fitness against the other teams, and certainly the high pressing, the high fitness levels that Espirito Santo wants. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it works. So yeah, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. I'm going to head off there now purely because I want to try and get this out there before we get the Romero decision. Fingers crossed it's a good one, because it would be great to have something really positive to report on after recent events. But yeah, I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of my day off now, hopefully. Have a little walk in the sunshine. But if I hear anything, of course, keep an eye on my Twitter account and all of that, and every other avenue that you get my information on. But I shall get everything out there as quickly as possible. So keep an eye. Harry Kane situation, yeah. I'm intrigued to see just how quickly he can return to training. And I do believe that will be because of isolation issues. And whether it has to be, whether we get some photos at some point just of him on his own, and you can clearly see he's on his own, because I can't see how he gets back into group training anytime soon. And I think there's probably going to be a little bit more to that to come out as well. So there you go. That's it. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.